evening, Manchester viewers. Welcome to Manchester Review. I'm Jack Peak, your host, and we've got, I think, a pretty good show for you tonight. In the past several years, we've done a number of shows involving Manchester High School, and we've had the Bully Busters on, we've had the Youth Leadership Group on, a number of things. A couple of years ago, or actually about 2.5, 3 years ago, we had the chief on, and we talked. At the time, there were a lot of issues with Manchester High School. There was a high arrest rate going on with the kids, which was a disaster. There were leadership issues at the high school. A lot of bad press for Manchester High School. Subsequently, an interim principal was hired, and finally, for this school year, the town found a permanent principal, Matt Geary, and he's our guest tonight. We're going to talk about what's been happening at Manchester High School and some of the dramatic changes in the climate, and certainly in the arrest rate. So, welcome, Matt Geary. Welcome to Manchester. Hope things have been going well for you at Manchester High. Of course, first year you step into it, so we have a couple of major issues that I think we need to comment on first. Earlier this year, there was a terrible tragedy in the high school pool. A student drowned. Loss of life, which was just terrible, and it must have been just gut-wrenching for everybody at the high school, not to mention for his family. And our sympathies go out to the family of Melvin Donkor. And then, of course, subsequent to that, just back in December, we had the Newtown massacre, and I think that set the stage for all schools in Connecticut to start reevaluating their safety procedures. So we're going to talk about those things first tonight, but we want to spend most of the program on things that have been happening to improve Manchester High School, get it reorganized, get the culture appropriately set and the climate. So we'll go there, Matt. But first, I think parents, anybody watching this show, probably first two things on their mind. What about pool safety at Manchester High School? What about just safety in general? How can you reassure parents that their kids are safe going to school?
Well, I'll start with pool safety. So obviously the tragedy in November was difficult for the entire Manchester High School community, and certainly Malverick's family. And so again, like you, we express our deepest sympathy to the family. And you know, the school community pulled together and got through that, and were able to support each other. So the next logical question, I think, is, you know, when do kids go back in the pool? What does that look like when they're back in the pool? Swimming is obviously an important skill for folks to have, and particularly if kids didn't have the opportunity to swim at a younger age. So, you know, to the extent that we can get kids back in the pool safely, that we can provide more supervision in the pool area, that we have documented swim tests. You know, we're fortunate we have that smaller rehabilitation pool adjacent to the high school. Yep. So, you know, as I sort of see it, you've got that pool, which is very shallow. You've got a huge high school pool that has a shallow end, and we would want, you know, probably a much more comprehensive swim test for kids, you know, before they venture into the deep end. You know, that would be recorded and checked up on. And you know, there are a number of informal tests that occur, but I think we'd want to tighten that up, and we'd also want to increase the supervision in the pool area. So those are two key steps that we would take, you know, before we put students back in the pool. We have a lifeguarding class that just last week actually went back into the pool. These are kids that know how to swim already. They're training to be lifeguards, and so there's added supervision, a second lifeguard on the pool deck, and you know, and these are kids that already know how to swim. So we're going to take it slow, be thoughtful about it, but we do think that swimming is an important skill for kids to have. We want to make it as safe as possible.
Do you expect to have a lifeguard on duty whenever there's a group in the pool?
Yeah, so we have our
in
PE,
addition to the
yeah, I mean, our PE staff those are certified lifeguards. So we expect to have at least one certified lifeguard and then a second person who's watching the pool. Yeah.
Okay, I was going to say that because I think it's a lot on a teacher, even if they're a certified lifeguard, to teach a class.
Without question.
And also be aware of all the safety issues. So.
Yeah, I mean, it is the pool environment, because you have kids that aren't swimming because they haven't changed, so you have them to supervise, you have the kids in the water. So, you know, to the extent that we tighten up the supervision there and really focus on a swim skills test before kids are allowed to be in the deep end.
When can parents expect, or when can students expect swim classes to start?
I would say that, you know, we're going to see how the lifeguarding class goes, and you know, the high school swim team is back in the pool. We were fortunate enough to have Trinity allow us to swim in their pool in the interim period, but the high school swim team is back in the pool. Same thing, there's a lifeguard on deck along with the coaching staff. But we'll see how swimming goes. And, I couldn't tell you exactly when they'd be back, but we will notify parents that's happening. But we think swimming is important, and so it will get there.
So it will be in the curriculum
Yeah.
at some point when you're ready to install the safety measures. Good.
Yes.
Okay, that's a good explanation. The second thing I think that's important to touch on is after the Newtown shooting is, how can you reassure parents? Or what's being done, I guess, to improve school safety in general subsequent to the Newtown shooting?
Sure. So we, anytime a school shooting happens, it sort of refocuses people on safety. And so we've taken a bunch of steps. Certainly we did a security walkthrough. We'll join the PD will join us in the second round of a security walkthrough. That is actually scheduled for next week. But simple things like people who are coming into the high school to visit, showing ID. So they typically sign in, get a visitor's pass. We want to check a photo ID with that. The high school doors are locked all day, but there are a lot of doors to the building. So we're fortunate in Manchester. We have a large security staff, around 12 security people, and so it's just really tightening of the process for kids and adults entering and exiting the building. That gets done through the main office, and then the lockdown procedure. We did another lockdown drill, but just that students would know what to do. Adults also, in the event that there's an emergency in the high school. So I think it's awareness, and through these walkthroughs, you pick up on things like what happens with locking of doors, and part of the walkthrough process is to keep the door locked, but those lock from the outside. So something as simple as if you're a teacher, you're going to keep the door locked, so that if there's a lockdown, you're going to close it and not have to fiddle with your key and try to get it locked. So there's a lot of simple steps. There are bigger picture issues around if there's an issue in the cafeteria. If we had the lockdown in the cafeteria, where do kids go? I think we would look at the kitchen probably, to be honest with you. So there are a couple things left. That there's a plan in place now. We're reviewing the plan. We'll have input from the PD on any revisions, and that's happening certainly across the state and country, right. But every school in Manchester, that it's happening at. So I think again, it's about just a joint effort between us and the PD, and I think parents. When you send your kids to school, I have 2 kids. One is 3, the other's 1, and my 3-year-old will go to preschool. Right. And so I think in your head you're thinking, how are they going to keep these kids safe? And I think, like the folks in Newtown, the best you can hope for in this situation is that the school is prepared and that the adults do everything they can to keep kids safe. Which, to the extent that they could do that in Newtown, that's what those adults did. And so, we've taken a lot of precautions. We've reviewed the process. That was one of the first things I did when I got here in April. Is what is the process? You can't have an emergency and say, "Whoops, I was new." You kind of got to do that on day one. So we reviewed the process in April. We reviewed it again in mid-December, and I think we have a good plan.
Yeah, the tough thing about Newtown was they did everything
Correct.
right. They did everything right.
Yep.
So there's been a lot of talk about I think the biggest concept now, whether it's going to fly or not, certainly a budget issue is. Do you need armed security?
Right.
I mean, you have resource officers at the high school, so you're a little different than the elementary schools. You already have a couple of people there that have weapons. How about arming teachers? You think that's...
I'm fortunate to have SROs in the building. I would not be in favor of arming teachers. I think I'm not, certain that reduces this. I don't know that we would have wanted, adults shooting at the shooter in Newtown. I think that would make me nervous. Trained police officers, which I'm fortunate enough to have in my building, certainly. But other armed adults, at least from my opinion, that would not be a good idea.
And the other thing about the high school is it's such a big facility and so many entrances that it's got to be a pretty rigid set of rules to control all those entrances and keep them locked. So anyway, folks, I think if you listen to that, you have some concept of what's going on at Manchester High, the security systems in place and being modified, and you'll hear more about that. It's going to be a big budget issue in some schools.
Yeah, there will be a big budget issue.
High school, it's already there. You got the resource officers, but in elementary schools and middle schools, what's going to happen there, I guess.
I would just add that I think in addition to sort of school security, the other thing that this calls attention to is just a renewed focus on mental health and just well-being of students. So in addition to obvious security measures, we want our support staff, teachers, parents who are noticing, things going on with their children where they feel a little off to be communicating with us, and we'll follow up. So I think, obviously security is a big focus, but I think, prevention through consistent sort of emphasis around mental health and emotional well-being of young people is a key focus.
I think part of the key to that is making sure every kid has a person on the staff that they can feel comfortable with and relate to. And that maybe a staff member that, if you have a list of kind of risky type of kids, somebody is looking out for them and giving them support, that type of thing can go a long way. So, okay. One of the serious things, of course, a few years ago was big in the press with all the arrests going on at Manchester High School. And the Institute, actually before you came into town, MAPS program, Manchester Agencies, Police, and Schools. Can you tell us about that and the effect that's had?
Sure. I mean, I think we're fortunate in Manchester to have, good collaboration, and I came into this, so good collaboration between the schools, the police, and all of our other agencies, and, a really thriving youth service bureau that provides all kinds of support for kids. So that all of us are working together, that people are on the same page, that we're communicating, that, arrest is really a last resort for kids, that we're, diverting them into drug substance counseling programs or community service programs or, check and connect with an adult, as you talked about before, that all of those things are happening, that people are working together, and certainly there's work to be done. But that these things are happening has certainly made a big difference for kids. And I think that's what you want. You want the adults communicating and working together on the same page in the best interest of students. So the MAPS initiative had a dramatic effect on the in-school arrests, school-based arrests, and we continue to see those numbers decline. And from a school perspective, we also look at out-of-school suspensions as something that and expulsions that we want to try to avoid. You want to maintain a safe and orderly building without question, but for us, in addition to arrests, we're looking at out-of-school suspensions and what can we do other than that to correct behavior, to re-engage students in learning. And so I think working with the SROs, that's gone a long way.
Yeah. The dimension specifics, the arrest, the high number of arrests in town, mostly at the high school and middle school, was 137, which was just an amazing number. But recently, up through this year, up through December, I guess it's 21 at the high school, or 21.
I think 21 is the total.
21 total.
I think that would be high at the high school.
So that's an incredible reduction, so it shows the effectiveness of that program. All right, so you're a new principal, you come into town, there's been a lot of issues, leadership issues. The previous principal was removed, they had an interim principal. The climate and culture had issues. What did you see when you started, and what's your focus? What have you done? Where are we?
So, I did a lot of research before even applying for the job. I did even more research while I was applying for the job. So I had sort of a good, at least outsider's perspective on sort of things happening. I read the
still took the job, huh?
Yeah. I read the NIASC report. I read some of the press statements. You checked the school website, all these kinds of things. And then for my first, I was fortunate to be able to get here in April and kind of just watch and see what was happening. Meet with kids and talk to kids, meet with teachers and talk to teachers. I met with some parent groups and talked to them. Certainly had input from central office staff. Talked to the administrative team that was in place at the time. So I did a lot of sort of listening and just watching. Really the first 2 months and kind of formulating, there are certain elements in every school, focus on student achievement and school climate, and that's across the board. It's what particulars in this school did we need to work on. So for me, I tried to kind of focus on, clearly, from NIASC that there's a culture and leadership problem because the school is on warning for culture and leadership. So you think, all right, what can we do about that? And then you look at the achievement scores and you think, okay, there's some work to do. And the two are connected, so you want kids to like coming to school, you want the environment to be positive, and that in turn will help achievement. So I guess for the first 2 months I sort of just watched. And, for me, it was a lot about discipline and less about connecting with kids, at least from an administrative perspective in some cases. So I want a place where kids know that they can go to a teacher or a counselor or an administrator and have a problem and talk it out. And there may be a consequence if you've done something wrong, but that we're going to talk it through with you and help you understand how to make a better choice. So that would be the approach I would take, and that wasn't entirely happening, at least for my first 2 months. So I took a lot of notes. I had a lot of meetings. There's a certain element of friction between the teaching staff and the administrative staff. So, and then that's not a secret. That's in the NEASC report also. Yeah. So you kind of watch that unfold, see what's going on there. And then, over the summer, we had two administrative retirements, an administrative transfer. So now you think, okay, you're going to put together this new team, and what are our needs? And so climate, culture, and intervention to support struggling students was a critical need. So we defined one assistant principal's role as just that, assistant principal for school climate, culture, and intervention. We wrote a job description, posted that, hoping to attract some really strong candidates, which we did. And then went about interviewing people, engaged teachers and counselors in an interview committee, and really comprehensive process, and identified really quality candidates, and put together a strong administrative team. So that was we had around 24, 25 resignations, teaching resignations from the high school in the summer. So I spent a lot of time hiring new teachers. Yeah. And again, when you meet with teachers, that's committee work. So you've got me on a committee with the department chair and a couple teachers. But again, you want to be talking to people about, we want people who are going to promote a strong school climate, who are going to connect with students, who believe all kids can achieve. So, we turned over probably 25 staff members. The majority of the majority of the administrative team, because you got a new principal. So it was about building strong teams to begin with, and then sitting with that team and going to work on a plan for improvement. So that was sort of the beginning. Yeah,
so it's major reorganization, administration, plus an infusion of 25, 27 teachers is a significant thing. Before we go too much further, you've got a pretty interesting, I think, pretty well-run website.
Yes.
Also, if we can get that graphic up there on the red line, MHS red line, tell us a little bit about that. Did you have major influence on that?
So we, the average high school website is boring and sort of clunky, and we really wanted to be able to use the website to communicate with people, but to have it sort of tell our story on a daily basis. And so we sat down in the summer and thought, geez, how do we make this better? We want this to be the best high school website around, and it is actually at this point, I think. Not that I'm not biased. But so I'm fortunate to have Jim Farrell as an assistant principal. He's got some news background, and so kind of knows that end. I have talented library media specialists, and then really talented students who change banners and interact with social media much better than adults do. So it's really a collaborative effort between administration, teaching staff, library media specialists, and students to get out there and make the website interactive, to have a Twitter feed, a Facebook page, to be able to give and receive information. So we're proud of the work on the website. We feel like parents and community members can access it and get really up-to-date information, which they couldn't before. And this is just sort of the tip of the iceberg for how we communicate with families.
Yeah, viewers, it's a great website if you take a chance to check it out. But that's one area you can really tap the resources of the students.
Yep.
Because they know more than we do
very
about all that stuff.
Absolutely.
But it's a very intriguing website, a lot of interesting stuff. I watched the flash dance in the cafeteria video.
Right before the break. Yeah, good stuff.
Flash mob in the cafeteria. If you want to check that video out. I don't remember that happening in my day at Manchester.
Yeah, no, I think that points,
that's a pretty cool website.
Yep. That you would, sort of plan a flash mob in the high school cafeteria during lunch. Only happens when you trust kids to do the right thing and to behave. And they did. Kids behaved appropriately. Yeah. They had a good time. So I think, all of those things, the flash mob is a good example of just small measures of improved school climate.
How do you change the culture, the climate and culture there? Because over the years, there were a lot of issues with kids being very disrespectful to staff, just not following directions, just disorderly and generally disruptive.
I think it's been my experience that you want to set high behavioral expectations for kids and help them rise to meet it. We've got a grid called Imagine that sort of points kids towards what are behaviors you need to follow if you want to have a bright future. And so Imagine talks about respect for others and innovating to solve problems and expecting excellence. So we've got a grid. We refer back to the grid, talk to teachers and kids about the grid. And that's where really it began. We sat down with teachers in late June and said, hey, how do kids behave? What are your concerns? And what are our behaviors we expect from kids? Not a list of things not to do. We have one of those too. We have a code of conduct. It's revised. There are, if you do this wrong, here's the consequence the first time, here's the second time, here's the third time. But the Imagine grid is really expected behaviors for success. And so we're in the first year of implementing that. You get pink wristbands kids and adults have, the lanyards say Imagine, drawing kids back to how do I get where I want to be in the future. And so there's that piece. I think just communicating, I have a committee of students, student leadership and innovation group. It's about 30 students representing class and club leadership, and then engage kids across the school. I think you have to listen to students. You have to say, listen, this is the 21st century. Do we really want to spend time chasing kids down about their phones, or do we want to let them use their phones as tools for classes? And am I opposed to kids listening to music in the cafeteria on their phone? Not really. Am I opposed to kids sending a text message from the caf during lunch? No. So I think you want to have a couple rules and enforce them consistently. And I think at the high school had a lot of rules that were inconsistently enforced, and those are both bad. Yeah. So we established some clear rules. We established what we expect, how we expect kids to behave. We talk to adults about connecting with students, and there's going to be a time where a kid has violated a rule and we need to address it, but it doesn't have to be where you embarrass the kid. It doesn't have to be sort of degrading, and you actually don't have to lose your patience. You just sort of talk to students, and the average kid you can level with, and kids that you can't level with, you get together with a school counselor, with an administrator, and you provide support. So we've done a lot of work. We have a long way to go, but I think if you walk into high school and talk to people, they would tell you the culture is better. We did a school climate survey in May. We'll do another one this May, and we'd expect to see growth in target areas.
So you're collecting data to kind of indicate if you're going in the right direction.
Well, and you can see suspensions are down, in-school suspensions are down, informal anecdotal stuff like the flash mob. I mean, these are things that probably wouldn't have happened before that that are happening now.
So as schools go, the first thing you have to do is get control. It has to be a climate that's going to be productive. And where kids are going to want to be there. So let's say, you have that happening, it's coming in place. Of course, the priority, the reason people go to school is to learn and to achieve and to excel. And Manchester's got an achievement gap as significant as most other towns in the state, or more so in some cases. A pretty serious achievement gap between whites and minorities, really. They always say upper income and lower income, but it really comes down to minorities. What's being done about that? How do you approach that? And it's pretty significant. It's a statewide issue.
Yes. I think, you have to approach that directly. You have to acknowledge that it exists. You have to plan to make it better. So with that, we have a consultant who works for us now, who is in classrooms, right now assessing, where are the issues with teaching? Are kids engaged or not? Which kids are engaged and which ones aren't? Looking at sort of curriculum revision. So I think the achievement gap is significant here. It's persistent. It's been around for a long time. I'm not certain that there's been resources directed at it. So, for example, we have a program now called Focus on the Future that we said, okay, 9th grade students, you're halfway through your year and you're not doing well. You're behind in credits, you're struggling in class. What are we going to do for you? We're not going to wait till you fail the year and move out. So this is facilitated after school twice a week by teachers. They're paid out of a grant we have, a college and career readiness grant from Manchester Community College, and half of that is sort of homework help, and half of it is mini lessons on things you need for your future to be successful. So, that's for struggling students. And, we've got an issue with multiple subgroups. We have certainly Black and Latino subgroups. We have students eligible for free and reduced lunch. There's a significant gap. And we have our special education students with learning disabilities. So there are gaps in every subgroup. I think you have to approach it directly. I think you look at programming. You know, we have a new mentoring lab. So every period of the day, there are upper class mentors. Then you pick mentors carefully. You know, you engage minority students in mentoring so that you can pair people who want to work together. And we have a structured study hall option for kids that puts 8 kids with a teacher. And again, they're bonding with the student, they're following up on work. So we've added a lot of interventions. We monitor data on interventions. You know, what is the racial makeup of this intervention? What are the outcomes? So I think you have to look at the data, you have to put it out there, you have to challenge people on things. You know, you walk through classes, we don't have enough minority students in honors classes. We have too many minority students in lower level classes. So I think you have to be direct and honest, and then you have to force the issue. You have to say these classes are not racially balanced. How are we going to make them racially balanced? You know, how are we going to help poor students engage in AP classes? What else do we have to provide? Is it a structured study hall? Is it, you know, a summer boot camp? So I think you have to divert resources to the achievement gap, which we haven't, in my mind, at least it's not evident that that's been done before.
Well, you're doing a lot of that now. I guess it's a very complicated issue because there's 100 things you can do in school to affect the achievement gap, but and the reality of it in a lot of ways comes down to family background and what's going on at home. There are some kids that show up at school pretty ready, and others not at all. I mean, how do you explain, for example, the fact that 100% of Asian students graduate in Manchester, but only 56% of blacks?
Well, I think here's where, you know, that we talk about equity as opposed to everyone getting the same thing. So there are going to be students in subgroups. There are white students also that they need more. There's not, so you have to, again, use resources. If you put some of these students that are struggling, whether they're a member of a subgroup or not, in the same amount of, you know, they get the same amount of English instruction as kids who are not struggling, that's not going to work for you. They need more time, so which requires more resources.
So you can identify them and then provide the resources.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to do a better job of saying, look, and like, you know, Focus on the Future is an after-school thing. We have a Saturday English credit recovery class that's skill-based. So sometimes it involves more time outside the school day. Sometimes it's going to involve more, you know, different use of the current school day. It certainly is going to involve engaging parents in the community. And, you know, we'll be successful with engaging some parents. We won't with others. But nonetheless, we're going to keep trying with kids. So I think, you know, it's a complex problem, requires sort of direct and honest work, and you know, engaging the community and
any outreach to families of those kids that are not.
Yeah, I mean, we have, you know, my assistant principals are working hard at just that. You know, they're on the phone with families, they're bringing families in, and it starts with, you know, these are not the 15 things your child has deficits in. It's here are some strengths and how do we build on these. So I think coming at it from sort of a strengths-based model is important, and resources are important.
All right, boy, we've covered a lot of ground tonight, and probably some ground we couldn't cover because we had there's a lot to talk about. I think my experience, my own students went through Manchester High School. It's been a few years now, but it's a tremendous, comprehensive high school. I think there's a lot to offer kids there, more so now even, but there's clubs, there's athletics, I don't think there's any excuse for a kid to be bored at Manchester High School if they want to get involved at all, because there are a myriad of opportunities, and not just sports, but different clubs and things. It's always been, I think, very comprehensive in that respect. Honors classes, AP classes, and of course you have those issues with the achievement gap, and you've got your work cut out for you, Matt. It sounds like you're on the road to changing the climate and culture, and you're on the road to working on things like the achievement gap and the graduation rate. So that's fantastic. I wish you the best. It's been great having you on the show. I'll have to do a follow-up sometime because there's so much to talk about.
There is.
Appreciate you coming on.
Thanks.
And your time. And as always, I want to thank our crew, volunteer crew members, Kathy Corcoran on the camera, Dick Christian. We got Jim Perry, Don Modine, Ellen Strano, John Barno in the control rooms. Thanks, everybody, and good night.